I think we're ready to start. So welcome everyone. You know, having a virtual conference is not ideal. And one of the best things about the conference is the wonderful organic food that we get. And, you know, this year we get, it was either not have anything or we get to have Sarah. And I have missed out on having Sarah's food for years. And getting to know her well. So I'm so pleased that she's able to join us and that we can virtually see, you know, how to make lentil mousse to begin with, and then maybe, you know, some of her philosophies on seasonality and sourcing local ingredients. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jamie, and thanks for going out just to the whole organization of MOA. I know that this is kind of a weird time, but kudos to you guys for still finding ways to keep people connected. I think that's really important right now. So I want to tell you a little bit about me, but I'm not going to go super in depth right now. My name is Sarah Manuel, and my business is Farmer Meets Foodie. And our main goal with everything that we do is to challenge the way society has taught us to eat. And so with that, we're sourcing locally, we're utilizing as many organic ingredients as we can, and we're doing crazy recipes like lentil mousse, for example. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a few farmers that you may have heard of that are members of MOA, that we actually source ingredients from already. We're constantly expanding our base for producers, but right now we're getting products from Almathea Dairy, we're getting them from Prairie Grass Ranch as well as Bee Bar Ranch. We get mushrooms from Garden City Fungi. We get stuff from Community International. We buy pork, chicken, and various produce items from Poultry. We buy oats from Montana Gluten Free. We get all kinds of different flour products from Montana Flour and Grain. Quality Foods Distributing is more of like a distributor for a lot of Montana products. So anything that we don't buy direct from the consumer, we're buying a lot from them. Another company that we're sourcing from is Timeless Seeds. And so that's kind of the same deal. There's a lot of farmers in the area that are growing from them that we don't buy from directly, but we buy from Timeless Seeds. So with that, we're using some lentils from them. These are Petite crimson lentils, and they're so beautiful. I don't know if I'm trying to make sure you guys can see them. I know it's kind of far. If at any point during this demo you need me to pause or get something closer to the camera, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. So these are the base ingredient of our mousse today. And a quick little history about lentils. There's a ton of them grown all over the state of Montana. They have a really, really great protein content. Even though we're using them in a dessert today, it's still a really healthy option for you in general. They have lots of really great key nutrients, including iron and magnesium, fiber, and folate. And for this particular recipe, I went ahead and I cooked the lentils in advance. Got them here. The cooking time for lentils depends actually on how old they are. But these ones I did on low heat and took about 35 minutes. You really want to get these, just for this particular recipe, you want to get them nice and mushy because you don't really want that texture in this. You want it nice and smooth. So, within this recipe, there's a couple bonus recipes. The first one is going to be pecan butter. It's something that I came up with specifically for this recipe, but you can use it in all kinds of different things. And it's super simple, 2 ingredients. All you need are pecans and a little bit of sea salt. So the first thing that we're going to do is just get these pecans toasting on the stove. The key with this pecan butter, first off, is you don't want to use high heat when you're toasting your pecans. That is something that I've had to learn a couple times the hard way. It'll burn them essentially, and just gives them kind of an off taste. So you want to do like nice and medium heat, and be sure that you're keeping an eye on them as you go. while those are toasting, I'm going to show you our second bonus recipe that goes with this. It's a honeycomb recipe. It's my favorite way to top off so many desserts, and it's actually so much simpler than regular caramel. So I'll show you the ingredients for that really quick. We've got this Montana honey from the Smooth Honey Company and some heavy cream. And what I'm going to do is just add both of these into a little cast iron pan, and they're just going to simmer happily the whole time while we make everything else. And it should be ready by the end. The ratio for this honey caramel is really easy to remember. If we're going for a sauce, you're going to do 1 part honey and 2 parts cream. And then the only other thing that I like to add towards the end is a little bit of sea salt. But for now, we're just going to let this simmer as it is. And we'll just keep an eye on it throughout the duration. Again, you want to keep an eye on your pecans. Be sure to give them a little toss or a little stir as they go. I want to talk while those are both cooking about the difference between this recipe and a normal mousse recipe. So if you're familiar with the traditional mousse, what you typically would do is you have a base, which is usually chocolate of some sort, and then you have an aerator, which is whipped cream, whipped egg whites, or even a combination of the two. This is a little bit different than the traditional, because again, we are using lentils. There's not quite as much of an aerator component like what you would normally have with whipped cream. The lentils are taking the place of that. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make our pecan butter in the food processor here, and then we're going to actually add directly to that. We'll put our lentils, our honey, our cocoa powder, and we'll also add some vanilla extract. And we're going to blend all of that till it's nice and smooth and silky. And then the very last step will be to add a chocolate ganache, which I'll show you as well. It's very simple. All we're doing is heating a little bit of heavy cream, pouring it over some bittersweet chocolate. We'll let that sit for a couple of minutes until the chocolate softens, and then we'll stir that till it's nice and smooth, and we'll carefully fold that into the rest of our mousse. All right, let's check on our pecans. They're just going to take a couple more minutes, and I do have a couple of images to show you guys. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see. Oh, I'm just seeing all the comments. Okay. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna just put this up here for now. This is the recipe that we're going off of. And I do wanna throw out there, with all of my recipes, it's more of an art than it is a science. I did do a trial run of this recipe to make sure that I had the ratios accurate, and adjusted a couple things to get it even closer to how it normally would be. But in all honesty, I do cook mostly to taste. But you are welcome to save this recipe for your own reference, and these are the exact ratios that I am following today.
We'll make sure that you all get the recipes for the pecan butter and the honey caramel and the ganache as well too.
Yeah, thank you for throwing that out there too, Jamie. Yeah, we'll be sure to send those and also a copy of this recipe as well as some instructions for it. Let's see here. Here are the instructions based on those ratios. If you want to just read through those for your own benefit.
Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about the Montana Culinary Institute?
Yeah, definitely. So Montana Culinary Institute is where I studied. I graduated that program in 2016. And essentially, it's a 2-year program. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment because I want to show you what I'm doing now with the pecans. Let's see. But it's all based on French style cuisine. And I learned so much. A lot of technique was built there, and then from there I refined on my own. But it was a wonderful opportunity.
And where is it, Sarah?
It's in Kalispell. Sorry.
Oh, in Kalispell, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The head chef that I studied under was the head chef at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, if that means anything to any foodies out there. He actually moved to France when he was 17 to learn the trade himself and kind of climbed up the ladder the hard old-fashioned way and brought all that back, ended up at the Waldorf Astoria and retired in the Flathead Valley and spends his time instructing culinary classes.
He sounds like a treasure.
Yeah, he is. You know, I was just chatting with some people from the program a couple weeks ago, and I thought he had retired for real, and he did for about a year and then went back. So I guess he just really can't stay out of it. But he's an amazing resource to have, and there's lots of other amazing chefs that are also available to the students there. So what I've done at this point is the pecans are toasted and I am a food processor. And all we're gonna do is add a teeny bit of sea salt, just for flavor. And those are the only 2 ingredients in this butter. So we're toasting the pecans. That's very important because it's releasing those flavors releasing the natural oils of the pecans. And now we're just gonna blend this until it's nice, and just think of the consistency of peanut butter. That's what we're going for. It does take a couple minutes, so, and I don't know that you'll be able to hear me while it's going. So I did get a couple pictures ready for you guys that I'll show, just in case cooking with lentils is something that you're not super familiar with. And since I skipped that step, I did take a couple pictures of that process, so I'll show you that right now. Okay, so it is important too during this process to keep the sides scraped down, especially in this food processor. It's kind of huge. So I did do a double batch of the recipe that I showed you, honestly, just so that it will mix properly. My food processor is kind of a monster. I'll show you what it's looking at right now. So we're really close. I just want it to be a little bit more together because, again, this is going to be in a mousse, and we don't want texture in our mousse. We want it nice and smooth. So I'm gonna let that keep going. Alright, it's really, really close. I'm just gonna give it one more scrape down. Starting to look really nice. Show you guys too. That's kind of what it's looking like right now. So really close to where we want it to be. Like a nice, thick, succulent.
Is there a chance that that might be, if it were too dry, if you thought it was too dry, would you add a little oil or water or?
You know, I don't add anything, but I don't think it would mess it up. Depending like if you, like on the water content of the pecans when you started, you might want to add maybe a little safflower oil would be good. Or even coconut oil would be just fine. I just personally like safflower oil, so it's from Montana. All right, so it's much better now though. This is about what we want. Essentially just imagine if you were trying to like spread it on a piece of bread. That's what we're going for, so it's nice and smooth. You don't really need it to be, it's less about consistency as far as like thickness or how thin it is, and more about just, you don't want any grit is more what we're going for, because the lentils, the honey, and the ganache are all a little bit thinner, so it'll even out the actual consistency of the mousse. So from here we have our pecan butter finished. Again, all that was some toasted pecans and a little bit of sea salt. We just let that go in the food processor for a couple of minutes. So now we're going to add our nice and mushy lentils. Again, the process for that, be sure that you rinse them. That just gets any dirt or little stones or bugs out of there that might have been there from processing or transportation. So like I showed you in the photos, be sure that you give those a good rinse. And then I cooked these lentils in just some simmering water. I did a 2.5 to 1 ratio. So if it's 1 cup of lentils, 2.5 cups of water. And then you just cover that. You want to do a medium-low heat. If you do it too high, it doesn't make as good of a product. It'll work, but if you want really high quality, go for the medium-low. Give it a good 35 minutes to really get soft. And then it'll be this good mousse-worthy consistency. So we're just adding that in here. And at the same time that we add the mashed lentils, this is raw cacao powder. We're going to go ahead and put that in here. Again, these, I measured everything out for a double batch just because of the size of the food processor. And some raw honey. Go in next.
Where do you get your honey, Sarah?
So this, I get honey from all over the place. This particular honey came from Power, Montana. It's Smoot Honey Company, and honestly, it's one of the more convenient places for me because they sell it at IGA in powder. So if I'm in a pinch, they sell like half-gallon barrels there. And I love this vanilla extract. It's from the Frontier Co-op, the organic vanilla extract. I get it from Food Service Direct, but I think Thrive Market also has it available. And I was taught to always do, even as a child, I was always taught to do more vanilla than what the recipe calls for. I think that's one of the great secrets of baking. In this case, I'm just going to do a couple capfuls. That should be perfect. Okay. And before we get that going, I'm going to go ahead and get our ganache started. So ganache is very simple. If you haven't heard of it in the past, it's a French recipe, and it's a component in lots of different desserts. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat this cream, again, over medium-low. We don't want it to scald, and we don't want it to be boiling, but just before it would start to simmer, like just before those bubbles will come up, we're going to remove it from the heat. And I have this bowl of chocolate chips, and we're going to pour the hot cream right on top, and we're just going to let that sit for a couple of minutes. And then after it's had time to soften the chocolate chips, we'll stir it. It'll be this beautiful, silky, smooth sauce. It sets up later, so that's going to be something that really gives the mousse some body when we leave it in the fridge to set up for a couple of hours. That's going to be the key. It also adds a lot of richness because of the chocolate and the cream. In all honesty, you could make the mousse without this. You would just have to do more of the cacao powder. But in my opinion, it's so much better with the ganache. I've tried it both ways. If you are trying to go dairy-free with this recipe, then you definitely still can. All you have to do is replace heavy cream with coconut milk. Well, coconut cream, like the thick part, if you were to buy a can. And then make sure that your chocolate chips are dairy-free, which usually if they're bittersweet, they would be. But if not, you can always find a vegan option there. So again, I'm just going to heat this up on the stove. It won't take long. I'll check on our caramel. It's looking beautiful over here. I don't know if you guys have ever attempted just regular caramel where you cook the sugar with the water and let it caramelize on its own that way. But I mean, that's fairly a simple concept too, but something about honey caramel for me has always been so much simpler and it tastes so much better. And it's a Montana product, so we're not, I have nothing against cane sugar, but honey is something that we're producing right here in Montana. And so it's all the better. I've tried a few different ways of flavoring where you add, vanilla or maybe a little bit of cardamom to the caramel, and that's fun. But in my opinion, it's really just best on its own. Just with that teeny bit of sea salt, you really highlight the flavor of the honey, especially if the honey is from a really good source. So what I have done in the past with this mousse recipe is, I guess I'll give you a little bit of history while we're waiting for these things to cook. I developed this recipe just this summer, actually. It's relatively new. And I did it because Timeless Seeds, who I get my lentils from, they were doing a farm tour, like a virtual farm tour in this area. And they had a dinner here at the farmhouse. I'll give you a little info on that later if you would like. But essentially, this is my commercial kitchen. It also has a cute little dining room. So the Timeless staff came here and I made them a 3-course meal. And the goal was to incorporate as many of their products into the meal that I possibly could, which was a really fun challenge. And so for the dessert, of course, their main gig is lentils. So I had to fit lentils into the dessert, which is where this recipe came from. All right, let's check our cream here. All right, it's just almost to that point of bubbling. We'll give it a little stir to make sure that our heating is even. It's very, very, very close. All right, we've just got these tiny little bowls on the side, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat for our cream. And we'll add it again right over top of our chocolate chips. I'll do that on this counter so you can see. So we're just going to nice and easy pour that hot cream over our chocolate. You do want to be sure that all of your chocolate is covered, of course, so that it melts evenly. And be sure that you're scraping everything down really well so we're not wasting anything. Alrighty, so we'll set this off to the side. And this is, again, just going to sit for a couple minutes till the chocolate gets nice and melted. We'll check on our caramel over here. It's looking lovely. The beautiful thing about this too is that with caramel, you can let it go as long or as short as you really want, depending on your tastes. So, you know, right now I'm just letting the caramel flavors develop. We could call it good in 20 minutes. We could call it good in 2 hours, depending on, you know, how much of the raw honey flavor do we want compared to how much of that really caramelized flavor are we going for. So it's really versatile, gives you a lot of room for creative play, which I always love, especially with desserts. So while our honey caramel is going, we've got our ganache heating. We're gonna just blend this. Again, this is the pecan butter, the lentils, the honey, the vanilla extract, and the cacao powder. So I'm just gonna give this a whisk.
What kind of food processor is that, Sarah?
What's that, Jamie?
What kind of food processor is it? It looks really big.
Oh yeah, it's an industrial grade. I can move it closer to the camera. It's the brand is Waring. But this, I don't know.
Looks very nice.
But it's one of my pride and joys of the kitchen. I think I use it 7 times a day on average. Okay, so again with these, I want to make sure that you're scraping down the sides, get everything evenly incorporated. It's looking really nice though. I wish that you guys could smell through Zoom.
I wish I could lick the bowl, Sarah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. You know, you take the lid off the food processor and it just hits you with this aroma of the toasted nuts and the dark chocolate, and we haven't even added the ganache yet. And then the lentils. I love putting lentils in this because I don't want to use the word earthy, but if I come up with a different word, I'll use a different word. But essentially, it's like, you know, you get the richness, you get the toasted sensations, and then the earthiness of the lentils almost like grounds it. I just wish you could smell it. It's so good. That's very nice. So I'll show you what it's looking like right now. So it's pretty, it's not runny, but it's not super thick. That's because it's warm. The lentils, like I just finished cooking before we got on the call. And so this will thicken up a teeny bit when we add the ganache, not much, but most of the magic happens texturally when we let it set up in the refrigerator. So right now, we're going for flavors, and then we'll give it, you know, an hour or so set up on its own. I'm just gonna taste it and make sure our flavors are on point before we add our ganache. Yeah, perfect. Okay, see how this is going. Perfect. So you can see in this bowl, our chocolate has started to soften. So all I'm doing is just gently giving it a little stir, and that chocolate is going to naturally incorporate itself into the cream. When you're working with chocolate, it's very important to not let any water come into contact with any bowls or utensils that are going to have chocolate in them or near them, because water actually will seize chocolate. So it gives it this weird texture, almost like, picture if you're making a custard and the egg curdled, that's what water can do to chocolate when it's melted. So, little tip there, always keep your chocolate utensils nice and dry. And you can see it starting to come together now. The dark in the center is what it's all going to look like here in a minute. As soon as we get that all incorporated. Again, this is chocolate ganache. Only two things in here are heavy cream and bittersweet chocolate. You can use any chocolate that you want. It's starting to look nice. It's like satiny is what we're going for here. So now, because this is a dessert, because it's mousse, there is a certain gentleness to its preparation. So in the food processor, the food processor is great, but it's kind of, oh, what's the word? It's, you know, it's kind of bossy. And so the way that we finish this mousse to really get the texture that we're going for, we're actually gonna mix this in by hand. So we'll set the food processor things to the side. We're gonna transfer our silky chocolate lentil mixture into this nice bowl. And we're going to just gradually add this ganache right in here. And then the very last thing that we do before putting it in our glasses to chill is just gently, we're just gonna fold this all together until it's seamlessly incorporated. So I mentioned briefly about our location earlier. So this kitchen right now that I'm in it's called the Farmhouse Kitchen. It's 9 miles south of Havre. And if you've heard of Streetery, the food truck that parks at Triple Dog Brewing, that's also me. And this is where, ever since last fall, this is where I do all of the prep for that food truck. Before that, we actually cooked 100% of our meals in the truck. But we have drastically upgraded. The history behind this house, it's located on Prairie Grass Ranch, that's my family. And this used to actually be about 20 miles east of here on a cattle ranch before my family was in the picture. And it was right at the foothills of the Bear Paw Mountains. And the owner at that time also owned this property that the house is on now, and he wanted to move it closer to town so that his hired hands could live in it. And everyone said, why would you go through the effort of moving that old house? It's just gonna cost a bunch of money. You could just build a new one. Because, you know, back then they're like literally dragging stuff with horses to get it from one place to the other. And he said, I love that house, and that's the one that I want to have. So they went through all kinds of trials to get it here. And right now it's sitting just to the west of Beaver Creek Highway. If you were headed out to Beaver Creek Park, it would be just a couple miles before the lake. And the way that we utilize it now, again, I use it for food prep for the food truck, and then we do our farmhouse dinners, and we do lots of catering as well. So this is really the heart of everything we do right now, is in this little kitchen. So we've got our mousse nice where we want it to be. On the inside of the bowl here. Again, it's not as thick as we want it, but that's because it's warm from all of the mixing and from the temperature of the lentils and the pecans actually. So what we're really going for is making sure our flavors are where we want them. If you get to this stage and you taste it and you think, man, I really would just love a little bit more vanilla, or I would love a little bit more sweetness or richness, whatever it is, you have creative license to add that. This is one of the beauties of this recipe is it really is flexible. It's pretty forgiving especially compared to traditional mousse recipes that are not forgiving at all. So the last step is pretty fun. You can use your receptacle of choice. For me, that's these crystal dessert cups. Something that I've been doing this entire year is collecting vintage glassware. And I got these, they're real crystal, and I got them from a woman in Haver who her primary occupation was taking care of elderly women that didn't have any family. And so when they would pass away, they would end up just leaving her all of these treasures that they had from their lives. And obviously she doesn't have room for all of it, so I bought some of it from her. And these glasses were some of those, and now they're a treasure of the farmhouse. I keep them in my china hutch on display in the dining room. And I actually have a few different sizes of this particular glass. And I used a smaller one to do the mousse for the timeless dinner. And we layered it with chunks of vanilla cake and the honey caramel that we're making. And I remember my brother was here for that dinner as a guest, and he bit into the dessert. Everyone went crazy over it. And he said, I explained that these, the age of these glasses are over 100 years old, and just some of the story behind them. And, it's just this cute little dainty glass. And he was like, I really wish that people ate bigger desserts back then, because I want like 3 of these. So I went with the next size up for this demonstration. Again, since I doubled our recipe, I only have 4 of these glasses that I'm going to fill, and I'm going to save the rest of this. I'll have to fill you guys in. I've never tried freezing this recipe, but that is my plan with the rest of this mousse today. I'm going to try and freeze it and see how that goes, because if it works well, I think I'm going to eat it for Thanksgiving. If it doesn't go well, I guess we will compost it. So maybe we'll have to do an update in a couple of weeks. Just let that settle. Okay. You just want to make sure that your rims are nice and clean before you put it away to chill. We'll set those off to the side for now. And that's it for the mousse. The honey caramel is really just simmering away. It could be ready at any point. I'm not going to pull it off the stove because it's really hot, but maybe, yeah. Ideally, I would let it go. It's probably been going for about 30 minutes, and I would let it go for about 10 minutes more. So you do want to give yourself some time on that. Does anybody have questions for me about anything else that we covered?
Sarah, how often are you doing your dinners these days at the farmhouse?
It really depends. That's a complicated question. We have one this Friday. Mostly we're doing just private events right now. So like you can reserve the space, and I like to get at least 8 people in here for private events, but we can hold up to 18 people in our dining room. And other than that, it's just, you know, it depends on my catering schedule. Like whenever I'm not booked, I'll put an event out a few weeks in advance and just sell tickets that way. So to answer your question in simpler terms, right now we're doing about 3 events a month, typically on weekends.
Is that including catering, or is that just the
No, that's just like the public farmhouse dinners
okay.
that we're doing.
All right.
Yeah. So just on the days that I have available, I squeeze them in there.
Okay. And so you're staying busy catering too then?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it looks different this year, of course,
Right.
with holidays, but yeah, we do catering, and then we also do holiday pies and cheesecakes. Cheesecakes is actually kind of what kicked me off in the world. I started making those as a teenager, and I sold them at the farmers markets, and that morphed into taking orders for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I was just selling them, you know, as a 17-year-old out of my house. And then fast forward, went to culinary school, graduated, and after starting my business here, we decided to actually go back into that because I had that client base still established in the community. So we do deliveries the day before Christmas Eve, day before Thanksgiving, day before New Year's. And we do, right now we're just delivering in the Hacker area, but if you live anywhere near the High Line, we definitely can arrange a time to meet you. And we do, again, pies, we do 3 different flavors, a pumpkin, flathead cherry, and an apple pie. And I was actually talking to one of our clients from last year today, and he said that he doesn't typically like apple pie, but they got one from me last year. And he said, I don't know what you did, but you hit it out of the park. And if you guys don't tell very many people this, I'll tell you what's different. And it's just the spices and the quality of the ingredients. So we're using Montana flour, of course, organic Montana flour. And then we get really good non-GMO Amish butter for the crust. And then, you know, obviously there's no like Crisco or shortening or anything like that in any of our pie crusts. And for the fillings, we're using organic fruit, of course, in the cherry pies, the flathead cherries, it's hard to go wrong there. But then the other secret with fruit pies is just really getting into the spices. So, you know, get more creative than just like cinnamon and clove. Like, what can we throw in there? Like, think about things like cardamom, think about ginger, things that, you know, they're not unusual, and you will see them pop up in different fall recipes, but they might not be your traditional apple pie, for example. So just things like that are always fun to have in the back of your mind. We also do cheesecakes. We do 5 flavors right now. We do, they're all New York style, so tons of cream cheese, tons of organic eggs, and we do citrus, we do blueberry cheesecake, and decadent chocolate. That ganache recipe that I showed you, there's a ton of that in our decadent chocolate cheesecake, and then there's another layer on top of the cheesecake itself. So that's one of my favorites. We do plain vanilla, which is really great if you're into the fruit sauces and things. And then our newest flavor we introduced last year is our vanilla pecan. And essentially, imagine if you had vanilla cheesecake, but then put pecan pie on top of it.
Oh man.
And that's that basically sums it up. So yes, to answer your question, we're between all of that baking and our catering and farmhouse dinners, that about takes up all the time.
Okay. Emily wanted to know more about what you use in your pie crust in place of shortening. You said Amish butter?
Yeah, just butter straight across. I've also used lard. Lard works really well. I just don't really have enough of it on hand to do the kind of volume that I need. So I get, the brand is Minbera butter, and it's from an Amish company. It's all non-GMO butter. That's something that I ordered from Quality Foods, which I mentioned earlier. I believe they're a member of MOA, and they have a lot of.
They have been a tremendous supporter of MOA. At the conference, they're sponsors. And then we have the Montana Food Providers Project, and they were just wonderful. And I know it wasn't just us too, that they work with a lot of organizations and Montana farmers and ranchers and grocery store owners and caterers, and so they're just a real treasure again. Another Montana treasure. So Randy Lindbergh is, I can't believe all that he does for Montana. We're very lucky. And especially as
I agree.
with the Food Providers Project, I know there have been a lot of outreach to communities with food boxes, that sorts of things, and extra food, that's going across the state. And he has been just wonderful helping out with those things.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I discovered that company back in, well, I guess it was back in the beginning of 2018, because that's when we launched Foodie, a food truck. And I was just trying to get my hands on as many organic Montana ingredients as I could, so I came across them. And other than that, it was a lot of direct to consumer. Like I was driving to Fort Benton to get flour from Montana Flour and Grain. At that point, 2 years ago, Quality Foods was the closest delivery spot was Great Falls. So I was actually making a 2-hour drive, like once every 2 weeks, to go and get things. And I just, every month I would be like, please just come to Havre, because it was me and one other business in town was ordering from them. So sometimes we would trade off and pick up each other's orders. But, driving a 4-hour round trip every 2 weeks kind of.
That ups costs.
Right. So they deliver to Havre now. There's actually all kinds of businesses that are ordering, which is really encouraging to see all the local products popping up around town. I know the IGA has been getting some stuff in from Almathea and Lifeline Dairy. I think I forgot to mention them, but we also source from Lifeline. All their cheeses. Does anybody else have any questions about sourcing or recipes or anything that we talked about today?
Well, I can't wait to make it up to your dining room or a catered event, or to have a face-to-face event with Pop or with MOA.
Yeah. One of these days, yeah.
Yeah.
One of these days you'll be able to do things and see people in person. And
exactly. Mary has joined us tonight, and she's new to MOA. And so I wanted to make a special welcome to her, and sorry she's not getting to meet us all in person. But Kathy is a long-term MOA member, and Emily, you guys have been around too. It's getting to be quite a while. Be quiet.
I would love to hear from anyone on the call. Like,
what's that?
I was gonna say I would love to hear from anyone on the call what they're producing. Are you what crops are you growing? Are you into veggies? Like, what are you growing? That's what I would love to know.
Is it me?
I unmuted us if you want to talk.
Hi, Emily, Michael.
I got sneak attacked. I didn't know that I was actually going to be seen. But yeah, we grow, so far we've just done wheat and lentils. So we've grown the lentils for Timeless, but hopefully this 2021 is our first year we're actually certified organic.
Oh, wow.
We've been transitioning since then, since we've been up here. So we're finally organic, and hopefully we're wanting to do some other stuff once we're organic, and we can get some organic contracts for some of the other pulses and grains.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's so far.
Wow, congratulations. I'll just give a couple quick shout outs for what we have going on with in place of the MOA conference, our virtual conference. Tomorrow we do have a workshop at noon on organic certification for fruit production, so orchards or berries or grapes, that sort of thing. And that's being run out of the Western Agricultural Resource Center in Corvallis, Montana, and it just kind of came together. And Georgiana Webster, our organic program director for the state of Montana, will be on, and some orchardists, and so that's kind of a fun event. And then we also have Organic University. And Mary, this might be something that you're interested in. And I think Michael and Emily, did you guys do Organic U?
We did the very first year, like before we even moved up here.
And it, you know, again, it's not going to be as maybe interactive as it is in person, but we're trying to keep the same schedule that we've had before that has been so successful. And so that's November 30th through December 2nd. And again, you know, some of those sessions too, even if you have been organic for a while, you might find that it's beneficial as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so everything is there's no cost for anything. Just consider joining MOA or renewing your membership. Kathy gratefully is sponsoring the MOA conference this year, so shout out to Kathy. And yeah, so do we have anybody else have any questions or?
So I was just gonna ask, I was typing out a long thing and then I realized I could just talk. But, so Michael and I both didn't grow up like eating, like we ate pretty typical American food, I guess. So we're trying to like teach our boys and eat healthier and do things. So Sarah, you were talking about like recipes and stuff. We're just we really are trying to stockpile our like yummy and healthy recipe stuff. So I didn't know if you had a good source for looking for those, or if you had some recipes or places to look or things, if that makes any sense at all.
You don't necessarily have to find specific recipes designed around that ingredient. You can actually use a lot of these things as substitutes and ingredients that are in recipes you already love. So I'm not sure what types of foods you would typically eat in the past, but say you're into hummus. You can easily make your own hummus out of lentils or garbanzo beans. You don't even need things like tahini. You can add it, but honestly, you can just cook the lentils with a lot of like really garlic and spices and blend that way, especially if you have a food processor. Again, that's kind of a must, in my opinion, depending on how much cooking you're going to do at home. Any type of rice dishes, I like to substitute whole oats because that's a Montana product. It's really easy to find organic global oats here, and they're actually way more nutrient dense even than brown rice. So anything, if you're pilaf, or if you're just cooking rice to go with fish or chicken, if you like risotto, any of those things, you can actually substitute oats. So that's a really great resource. I mean, it really just depends how creative you want to get. If you're into Pinterest, even I get on Pinterest occasionally just because everything is beautiful on there, and it is a great source for inspiration to really get you fired up about some creative ways of cooking that maybe you haven't considered. And yeah, it just depends how far you want to go, really. Are there any recipes that you love right now that you would love to be able to convert?
Michael says he doesn't know what he wants.
He doesn't know what he wants. All right. Do you guys have any dietary restrictions?
What was that, Sarah?
Do you guys have any dietary restrictions?
No, we do not.
Okay, well, I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, I would just start experimenting, start exploring, depending on like how much cooking you've done in the past, and try making, like, look up a lentil hummus recipe. If you want to get real crazy, make your own crackers to go with it. Like you said, you guys grow weeds. I just made crackers for a farmhouse dinner a few days ago, and we featured hard red wheat and seasoned them with some fresh cracked black pepper and some Greek oregano, and just did a puree. It wasn't really hummus, but same concept. I did a puree of chickpeas and blended them with a bunch of roasted garlic and drizzled it with a little safflower oil, but I served it warm with we did pickled carrots and the homemade crackers and just things like that. I mean, just start playing around. Yeah, and literally any recipe that you love, that you grew up eating, you can recreate it using local organic ingredients. It just takes a little bit of creativity and a little bit of attention. I do want to show you guys this mousse right now. This is really hot, so these, or not the mousse, sorry, the caramel. This is beautiful right now. So again, this is really hot, so consistency wise, it's pretty thin, but this color is what we're going for. Again, we could let this go for another hour, and I'll bring this closer to the camera so you can see better. We could let this go for another hour, and it would just get a little darker, but for the purposes of this recipe, this is about where we want it. And so what I would do from here, if I was going to serve this with the mousse, while the mousse is chilling in the refrigerator, this would be going in a little bottle. I use like squeeze bottles with a fine point, but any kind of a jar that you have would be just fine. And you're going to also put this in the fridge and just let it thicken up a little bit. And then when it comes time to serve, you have your cute little glass of mousse. You can put a cute little star of whipped cream on there, maybe some crumbled toasted pecans if you save some from your pecan butter, and then a nice little drizzle of honey caramel, and you have a very sophisticated, very healthy dessert.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining in. Any other questions just before we call it a night?
Looks very tasty.
It does. And sophisticated.
Okay, I'll ask one last question.
Okay.
So I was just curious on your thoughts on what are the best things. So we really like cooking like healthy meals with lots of fresh fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. But also at the same time, we don't have a lot of time sometimes. So we like to just make things in big batches and freeze them. Do you have any suggestions on what are some good meal ideas that you can store and just reheat or something like that?
Yeah, we actually, that's my other gig that we started doing with COVID is freezer meals. So I am all for
Oh, Sarah's muted again.
Sarah, I muted you again. Sorry about that.
Okay, perfect. What was the last thing you guys heard?
Freezer meals.
Freezer meals. Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's something, especially with you guys' lifestyles. If you're farming, you're out working all day, and then you come home and you don't always have energy to spend an hour cooking something delicious for yourself. So I totally get that. And one thing that, yeah, I agree with you guys. It's really good to be able to just freeze stuff, heat it up later, you have something delicious. So some examples of things that we've done, I make enchiladas. We do like the fire roasted tomato sauce and some really good, we use lifeline cheddar and we use beef from our ranch and whole wheat organic tortillas. Again, that's a really simple, normal recipe that we're just taking really high-end ingredients and substituting them in what most people would use. And we do empanadas. So that's similar to pie dough, but it has an egg in the dough to give it a little bit more elasticity. And you can put anything you want in there. Like actually for our most recent farmhouse dinner, I did chicken empanadas, but I added turnips. You mentioned that you're really into using seasonal ingredients. So why not mix some of that in with your protein, especially right now, your vegetables are in season. So turnips, parsnips, potatoes, carrots, all of that. You can put in anything like a pasty or an empanada, or even if you're into pot pies. And that's a really good, like warm, comforting food, but you can add in all kinds of things like celery root is really good. You can get peas in there and onions, shallots, just all those things that are readily available right now. You can do and things like that. Another great thing that I learned on an internship, and I interned at an organic permaculture farm in Maui before starting my business. And one of my main jobs there was every day harvesting all of the mature greens. So we did primarily dandelion greens, kale, Swiss chard, bok choy, and we take all of that and it's like this big basket, we had this big pot and we would cut it up and just cook it down really slowly with some garlic and some butter and a little sea salt. And then once it's cooked down, it's got all those flavors, we just put it in Ziploc bags, got all the air out and froze it like that. Because now what you have is like this super nutrient dense, flavor filled packet that is frozen. And so you get home from a long day, cook a pot of oats or a pot of kamut. If you soak it in advance, it'll cook way faster. Little tip there. And then put some butter and salt and pepper and get out that bag of frozen veggies with garlic and put that on top. And you've got a super fast, nutritious meal right there. So that's another quick idea too. I'm sure there's lots out there, especially if you just do a little research and a little trial and error. I'm sure you'll find lots of other ideas too.
That sounds very tasty. On a cold winter day.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, again, thank you everyone, and thank you, Sarah, and hope to see you on some other sessions. Shoot me an email if you have any questions about what we're doing or if you see any problems. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and I'll be sure to get the rest of our recipes sent over to Jamie in case you guys want to reference those later. We can get them sent out to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good night, everyone.